Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about some of the most nonsensical campaign victory conditions in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, campaign victory conditions not being all that great can actually have a significant impact in your campaign. Either because you're missing out on some really good victory condition effects, or because even if you don't have very important victory condition effects like recruit rank in this case for the Dark Elves, it still is going to force you, if you want those achievements or if you want to feel like your campaign is complete, to go do things that are just completely meaningless and don't actually fit well within the campaign structure. So at number 5, we have Malekith. Dark Elves in general, but I think Malekith has the worst situation in terms of victory conditions, alongside Morathi, actually. Though I think Morathi is in a better situation with her victory condition. Because the problem with Morathi is she needs to deal with Hellbrand one way or another. But she could potentially get lucky enough to actually confederate her, even from a distance. Can happen, not guaranteed. But then you have Malekith. Her victory condition, short campaign victory condition, is to wipe out Tyrion. Now this seems like a reasonable campaign objective, and it is, for a long campaign objective. And that's the problem. See, you will generally achieve more things in terms of the long campaign victory condition, specifically getting the Shrine of Cain faster than you would wiping out Tyrion. Tyrion is on the exact opposite side of Ulthuan from where you would be invading it. And it's fairly far away. It does make sense. I'm not going to say it doesn't. But by the time you get there, let alone by the time you actually conquer Tyrion, your campaign is effectively over. And everything that lies after that feels like a grind. But what's actually worse about Malekith? If this was just the short campaign victory condition, fair enough. But then you also have the long campaign victory condition, which is deal with all the major High Elven factions. Now, Avalorn, Lothern, Ivres, Nagrith, makes sense. Teclis and Emmerich, those are a genuine pain. Typically speaking, in a campaign, you more often than not will see Teclis being wiped out by the AI, Kairos. So you don't have to deal with that. But what you do have to deal with is Emmerich, because Emmerich is all the way here in the Darklands. And his campaign does actually feature a good amount of durability compared to many other Legendary Lords. So you might see him sometimes wiped out by Drazif or Tretch or Queek, but more often than not, I do find that Emmerich can sustain himself for a fairly long period of time, which makes dealing with him in Dark Elven campaigns in general a fairly big annoyance. There's no territory to be gained, you're wasting time, you're spending time going there, and it's especially bad for Malekith because you do have Frozen, you do have Temperate Island, and you do have Chaotic Wasteland. So it makes sense to conquer Ulthuan, it makes sense to conquer Nagaron, but don't send me across the entire world just to go deal with a faction to achieve a long campaign victory condition. It means that realistically, if you're playing a campaign as Dark Elves, you don't care about victory conditions. Now, this is not really too much of a problem from the actual effect situation, but still worth highlighting how these victory conditions for Dark Elves, regardless of how you feel about their campaigns, do impact them in a negative way. Though, to be fair, in some cases it's better than others. Surprisingly, I think Hellbrand and Lokir are far more reasonable in this, but they do still end up falling in the same traps as well. At number 4, we have Grand Hierophant Katep of the Tomb Kings. Katep's campaign doesn't make sense, not as a Tomb King campaign or a Warhammer 3 campaign. You have this Tomb King Legendary Lord who has Wasteland, Mountain, but not Frozen, and he starts in a Frozen situation. That's already pretty bad enough. Then you also got to consider with campaign objectives the Books of Nagash. That's not something you can ignore in a Tomb King campaign, which requires you to go beat up Morathi, go beat up Mazdamundi in climates that are not favorable to you in order to acquire the books. And there's no other way of doing so. You literally have to declare war on them, capture their settlements. And even so, you're going to be limited in terms of expansion. But that's a terrain issue, climate situation, starting position dynamic. What about victory conditions? Because that's the point here. I would consider getting the Books of Nagash part of the victory conditions for the Tomb Kings. Just worth pointing out, because it is something that gives you significant benefits. And really what you're focused on. But short campaign victory conditions seems very simple. Occupy, lose, raise, or sack 30 different settlements, and then awaken all 4 legions of legend via the mortuary cult. This is a waste of resources, flat out. Tomb Kings are severely limited in their campaigns because of canopic jars. The last thing you want to do in this particular campaign is awaken any of these legions, because all of them, even though Katep does have a discount for it, but even so, imagine getting a regiment renowned of Carians, the most useless unit or one of the most useless units in the entire game. Or a Nehekara warrior, which requires you to get gold, and by the time you can even get them, you can get more Tomb Kings. Or Nehekara horsemen. The only unit that's actually worth anything, though it does require quite a few resources, are the Venom Knights of the South. But that's it, the Necropolis Knights. So you're wasting precious resources, which are limited, very limited in a Tomb King campaign, because if we look at canopic jars, especially early on in a campaign, the way you gain them is you fight a battle, and then you can gain 30. But then you realize canopic jars are used for hero capacity, army capacity, various other things, many other things that are infinitely more useful. Enchanted items, arcane items, weapons. Just, like, seriously. It's more expensive to get heroes and army capacity, to be sure, but it's such a significant waste of time and money to do so. Now, you can argue that casualty replenishment is not so significant, especially because you do get casualty replenishment heroes as the Tomb Kings, but casualty replenishment is always a useful thing. It's not as good as hero capacity, to be sure, or the raw material benefits that cast dwarves have, absolutely, but it's still a substantial benefit. But that's not even the problem. That's not why Katepa is on this list, because as annoying as this would be, you could do it while sacrificing some things, but still it's doable. No, what's really bullshit is this long campaign. You have to do the following. Beyond getting 60 settlements, you have to go all the way back to Khemri, which is all over here. So you're on the other side of the planet, and you have no sea lane to easily get back there, just pointing it out. If there was a sea lane, like, if there was some sea or some portal or something like that, that would be better, but even then it would still be a problem. Because then you need to take every settlement there, or most of the major settlements in that location, and build up all those pyramids. The problem with this, beyond having to conquer all of Khemri and first having to go there, then reducing the settlements by 1 level, spending a lot of resources, that's a huge waste of time. It's also the fact that you, in effect, have to kill Cetra if you're playing this campaign. And if you know anything about Katep and the lore, you know he's the guy who brought Cetra back and was very loyal to him. Doesn't make sense from a lore perspective. It's a complete waste of time. It's very grindy. It goes against the natural flow of the campaign in every way, shape, or form. Because you don't want to do that if you're playing a Katep campaign. You don't want to spend your time. It is a question of what you actually do want to do in a Katep campaign, to be sure, because of the climate situation is really bad. I mean, getting to a desert would be welcome, but you can actually make it work in Norska, surprisingly, because the mountains that exist there. But realistically, you're screwed because of climate either way. Still, when you look at the consideration of where the Books of Nagash are for him, and then you realize that a lot of these are not necessarily pushing you in the direction of going directly to Nehekar, you can kind of start to understand how ridiculous the campaign objectives of this campaign are. And they do. And while this campaign in itself would not be the greatest in the world, and it's pretty pointless as far as the campaign goes, when you add the victory conditions, it just becomes a completely pointless campaign to actually play in Warhammer 3. At number 3, we have Tyrion for the High Elves. If Malekith's campaign situation is broken because his short campaign requires him to deal with Tyrion, then Tyrion's situation is even worse. Because your short campaign victory conditions require you to deal with both Morathi and Malekith. Now, think of what this realistically requires you to do to achieve the short campaign victory condition. It requires to basically deal with all of the problems in Ulthuan, so Noctilus and Nakari, specifically Be'lakor most likely as well, because he does have that tendency. Then it requires you to go deal with Morathi. Then it requires you to march all the way north with Tarox, Silostra, etc. to go deal with Malekith. By the time you do that, this campaign is long done. In fact, by the time you even reach Malekith, you're likely in the final stages of your campaign. And then your long campaign victory condition does require you to not just control all of Ulthuan, but also deal with all of the major factions of the Dark Elves. Well, minus Hellebron, but basically Morathi, Malus Darkblade, Malekith, Lokir, and Rakarth. Who wants to go in Lustria to hunt down Rakarth? No one. But here's why this campaign is higher than Malekith or Katep. Because this genuinely does hurt your campaign. See, High Elves have a severe limitation on how many heroes they can recruit in their campaign because hero capacity is increased at tier 4, for Tyrion especially. So your hero capacity increases are going to come very slow, and by the time you do get even 2 heroes of each type, you're long past the mid-game. The way other races make this work is having a sensible short campaign victory condition that gives them extra hero capacity. And this is one of the things that actually works extremely well in Alariel's campaign, because not only does she have the ability of recruiting handmaidens far earlier and easier than everyone else, her short campaign victory conditions are actually sensical. Deal with the Scourge of Cain, deal with Nakari, deal with a couple other things, but it is in the nearby area. Your short campaign victory condition does not require you to hop around all the way to the north to beat up Malekith. Now, as a longer campaign victory condition, sure, and she does suffer from the same issues as Tyrion in terms of a long campaign problem, but at least she can make that short campaign work. Tyrion, while he certainly has an enormous level of strength as a Legendary Lord, because he gets that local recruitment duration of -1 turn for infantry and cavalry units, which is not insubstantial, and he is an exceptionally good Legendary Lord with a really good province, he does end up suffering quite a lot in his campaign. Also, the fact that Wasteland is uninhabitable for him is not an especially great dynamic. Its climate situations do need to be improved in general. I think that every High Elf should have every climate of Ulthuan suitable for them. That's where I stand on that specific subject. Basically, what I'm trying to say, of the High Elf Legendary Lords, Alariel is the best, because her climate is the best. She can take all of Athaloran, she has the Forest suitable, she has Temperate suitable, she has Frozen suitable. She won't have Wasteland suitable. There are some problems in that, but it's not uninhabitable. And that's one of the problems in Tyrion's campaign. Climate plus victory conditions plus pacing of High Elven campaigns do make for a pretty bad campaign situation in terms of objectives. And number 2 is Zetan the Black of the Cast Dwarfs. This is a campaign where the entire campaign dynamic, the objectives of the campaign, do end up screwing you over in every way possible. It's not really a hard campaign, I would say, because Cast Dwarves are Cast Dwarves, but it's absolutely a very frustrating and annoying experience to have to deal with. Basically, if you're playing Cast Dwarves, you're just far better off playing Astrogoth and Drazif, which is kind of a shame, really, because Zetan is a really cool Legendary Lord. He's got a good amount of power. Having extra caravans is not insignificant. But it's such a painful experience that whatever benefits he has are lost, given the fact you start with the tier 1 settlement, given the fact that you're marching east, but really you want to march west, and the fact that if you don't march east and then south, you're going to miss out on things. Now, the long campaign victory conditions, rather, are reasonable enough. Deal with Karakatrin, deal with Karazak, deal with Grimgor. They'll be dealing with Grimgor much earlier than that. Because he's right in your backside. So if you're playing on any difficulty in this game, there's a fairly high chance that Grimgor will declare war on you. But then, we gotta talk about the short campaign victory conditions. So here's your short campaign victory conditions. And it's really important because it gives you major relic missions, it reduces the workload requirements, and it also reduces the raw material consumed per turn by buildings by 15%. And those major relic missions are a lot of power. So you're missing out if you can't complete your short campaign victory conditions in a sensible way. What's worse is you need to take out the Great Bastion. Now, in the best possible scenario of this campaign, you could just simply put Ally Village and hope he does it. You'll miss out on a landmark with that though, because the best way to ally Village is to give him territory in the province adjacent to where Zetan starts. So this particular province, you take stuff, you give it to Village. Let's just auto-resolve that. Maybe that will grant me division. But yeah, you do that, and that's how you'd miss out on this landmark. You can live without this. It's only 5% upkeep for artillery units, battle healing cap for war machine units, 50 armaments. It's pretty insignificant, right? Yeah, that is a really, really great campaign dynamic to be dealing with from the beginning of your campaign. So at best, you have to engage in you have to basically abuse diplomacy, take the Dragon Crossroad of Iron Storm, sell that to Village, get that deal going with him. At worst, you're screwing yourself over, having to fight some very difficult early game battles, and this is, by the way, a problem for Village as well, who doesn't have Grimgor in his backside, to be clear. But the limited area, as well as the distance in this area between settlements, really does end up hurting you in a fairly substantial manner. Because, again, you have to take not just one portion of the Great Bastion, but all of it. Or be allied with the faction that takes it. Now, Village will usually do that, if you let them. But again, you have to trade them territory to pull it off, or you have to delay, or you can try and delay. But then, even then, you are basically in a race to take the Dragon Crossroads before Village does. And guess what happens when you declare war on the Imperial Wardens? They'll counterattack when you move out of there and take it back. And then Village will ruin it. It's a really fun campaign experience. I swear that Zetan is predisposed. Like if you're playing the Zetan campaign, you're actually better off just going after Village and try and kill him in a campaign like this. But you can't ignore Grimgor because he will be coming for you. And you miss out on a lot if you just pretend those victory conditions don't exist. At best, you might hope Village and Snitch can deal with Miao Ying for you, but relying on the AI to do anything for you is playing Russian roulette with nukes. And that's kind of the dynamic you end up having in this campaign, which really, like, there's multiple issues that contribute to this, but basically the victory condition situation does contribute to how painful this campaign ends up being. I guess at best you could just say, well, I don't really care about this province. You can ally Tamarkan, hope he deals with Grimgor for you. But again, just not a great dynamic to be dealing with whatsoever. Finally, at number 1 is Nurgal. Not just Tamarkan, but Nurgal as a whole. I would say it does end up hurting Tamarkan more so than Epidemius or Kugaf, but let's be very clear. The Nurgle victory conditions are pretty bad because you need to destroy factions as opposed to just being able to vassalize them for diplomacy. And guess what? You can vassalize for diplomacy as Nurgle, as all the demon factions, in fact. It's one of their key strengths. It's actually one of the things that makes Khorne so great to play. But Nurgle does have a lot of problems in terms of structures. However, that can be dealt with. Bad climate, construction costs, infection costs, you can deal with that, even if it is very annoying to just abuse Master Mason. But it works, even if it's slower than in other campaigns. What you can't do is deal with a bad situation of victory conditions. Because dealing with the mountains as a Nurgle is especially painful, and your victory conditions do require you to deal with the mountains. Actually, in every Nurgle campaign. That is just such a really bad thing. Tamarkan at least has the beast path, so you do have tunneling, which makes dealing with the mountains less of an annoyance. But again, the climate, you're taking territory that's not worth investing in because you can't build barracks, and even regular Nurgle construction is actually on the expensive side of things if we look at the various costs involved of, various structures over here, let alone the construction time. So that is absolutely a problem. But then we look at the victory conditions, and this is where it starts becoming insanity. Your short campaign victory conditions requires you to deal with Kolic, okay, your initial enemy. Gremgor, okay, pretty stupid, having to take over an entire province or multiple provinces of the mountains, but okay, we can deal with that. And then Greases. Forcing me to deal with Gremgor is one thing. Because when you could, by the way, vassalize Gremgor. But when you force me to deal with Gremgor and Greases in the same campaign, that is just pure fucking pain and suffering. It's not worth it. It's literally not worth it in any campaign as Nurgle to actually care about the victory conditions, because you're always going to end up being worse for it. If you want the Nurgle achievement, understand you're playing the worst possible way as Nurgle. Consider this. If you're playing a campaign in the Mountains and more, there are three major factions that can gain a lot of power. One hates you. Gorse hates Nurgle, Vampire Counts and Nurgle hate each other for various reasons. Lore reasons. Okay, fair enough. So that leaves Gremgor and Greases, both powerhouse factions, both with a lot of money, both with a lot of armies. And you not only have to wipe out one of them, which in itself would be a pain, but hey, you can ally the other, get a vassal with the other, get a lot of money, get other troops, etc. That's power. But no, you have to wipe out both of them. Now, put yourself in this situation. I did give Greases everything to the north. Like, I gave him the Bone Road, I gave him the Ancient Giant Lands. Fair enough. What I didn't give him is anything else. So imagine having to conquer all of this against Greases. It's not really that difficult, necessarily so, because he doesn't necessarily have the best armies in the world at the moment, though he is going to start scaling up very quickly, but it's just that slow grind of a process. Again, it's not difficult. It is just it's literally just hitting your head against a brick wall. Tamarkan has amazing, unique mechanics. Like, the Chieftain's mechanic is great, even if increasing Chieftain fealty can sometimes feel like a game of bullshit, but the uniqueness that they bring is amazing. It's rather just like filling up these meters. That's the painful aspect of it, because Creative Assembly can't handle campaign pacing in any good way, shape, or freaking form. But this campaign, like all the Nurgle campaigns, are ruined by the victory conditions, because it's the same thing. It's dealing with actions in a mountain. It's dealing with actions you could vassalize through diplomacy. Like, if you're playing a Epidemius campaign, there is no sensible reason to fight Malus Darkblade. He has a lot of money. You can trade him stuff for money. And he's also very painful to deal with. So why would you fight him? There's no reason, no diplomatic reason that you should fight him. But, you're just forced to deal with him because victory condition. That is stupid. And this has been an issue since Thrones Decay. Like, believe it or not, the Nurgle rework is amazing. It's the pacing and the victory conditions and filling up the meters that are the problem. It's basically small, simple shit that Creative Assembly should have fixed shortly after TOD came out, and they never did. Like, this is where you can get really frustrated with Creative Assembly, because the game is littered with this kind of stuff. CA will only release an update that they feel they can get away with something meaningful. They will not touch these minor issues. Literally, a single person, a modder with no experience, can fix these issues. And they do. There's quite a few mods that actually do fix these issues. But that's where we get frustrated with Creative Assembly for not doing this. I don't know why. exactly. I'm not going to say they're lazy. I'm sure that a lot of people would just say that. I don't think it's that. But clearly, they should allocate these resources, and yet they're not. Because they would vastly improve these campaigns' replayability, fun factor, make them more worthwhile. Surprisingly, you might get more people to actually, think that buying Nurgle DLC is worthwhile. Because I can't tell people right now to buy Thrones of Decay from a Nurgle standpoint. I can tell it from an Empire standpoint. I can certainly tell it from a Dwarf standpoint. But Nurgle is flat out not worth purchasing or ever playing because of their bad dynamics. They're a powerful race. I don't dispute that. It's just the way their campaigns play out that is really frustrating to engage in. That's all I had to say. Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.